Alright, what's going on guys? In this video I'm going to show you how to upgrade the Jace Arcane Strategist Planeswalker deck. As always, do keep in mind that these are not intended to be tier 1 competitive decks. If you want that, consider checking out the latest tournament results. Also, if you want the most powerful deck you can get for the cheapest price, I would definitely highly recommend the Challenger decks, which are much better suited for competitive play. But in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be upgrading this deck card by card, sticking to this deck's themes, and doing it on a budget, as we will not exceed $15 USD with our upgrade. I know the currency isn't relevant to everyone, and I apologize for that, but $15 is typically how much these decks sell for, so that should give you an idea of how much we are spending. So, the Jace Arcane Strategist Planeswalker deck is a Simic or blue-green deck that is built around the Proliferate ability, as seen with Bloomhulk and Kiora's Dambreaker. This ability lets you add counters to any permanent or player that already has a counter. So if you combine these cards with things that add counters, such as Merfolk Skydiver and Hollandbright Druid, then you get to just start doubling up on these counters. Basically, you want to put a bunch of counters on stuff and then proliferate to keep adding more and more of those counters to all of those things. Oh, and don't forget, Proliferate works with any kind of counter, so that includes loyalty counters on Planeswalkers. Yes, when you proliferate, you do get to add counters to your Planeswalkers. Anyway, the exclusive cards that come with the deck, the cards you can only get by purchasing it, are Jace himself, along with Guild Pact Informant, Jace's Projection, and Jace's Ruse. The deck also comes with some pretty terrible cards that shouldn't be played in any deck ever, such as Ward Scale Crocodile and Primordial Worm. These are just big clunky creatures that don't really work with our strategy at all, and there are plenty of cards that are just strictly better than these things. Just compare Primordial Worm to Carnage Tyrant, for example. Yeah, same mana cost, same power and toughness, but the dinosaur is uncounterable, untargetable, and it tramples over small blockers. So that's the general idea here. We're going to take out terrible cards and we're going to replace them with things that are better, and we'll be doing it all on a $15 budget, so we can power up this deck without spending tons of money and just have a better, more powerful deck. Sound good? Let's get started. First off, we're going to take out 2 Ward Scale Crocodiles for 2 Bioessence Hydras. So they both cost 5, but the Bioessence Hydra has the potential to be absolutely massive, and it has Trample. So when it enters the battlefield, it gets a +1/+1 counter for each loyalty counter on Planeswalkers you control. Then, you get to put more +1/+1 counters on it as Planeswalkers gain loyalty counters, which is pretty crazy, especially since we proliferate and can add counters on Planeswalkers multiple times per turn. And another important thing to note with the Hydra is that this deck has Kiora Behemoth Beckoner. You'll notice that it starts with 7 counters, meaning if you play the Hydra with a Kiora in play, you have a potential 11/11 Trampler. Plus, Kiora's ability allows you to untap a permanent. So on turn 4, you can tap 4 lands, then use Kiora's ability to untap one, then tap it again for a 5th land, and play the Hydra on turn 4, and it'll be a 10/10 Trampler. And that's pretty good for turn 4. Plus, when the Hydra comes into play, you get to draw a card off of Kiora, so that's a pretty nice bonus as well. And then, remember, when you proliferate, the Hydra will see the counter go on the Planeswalker, and it will get an extra counter. For example, if you proliferate, the Hydra will get a counter, Kiora will get a counter, and then the Hydra will see Kiora get that counter and trigger and get an extra counter. Pretty crazy, right? The Hydra can just go absolutely crazy. Next, we're going to take out the Primordial Worm for another Bioessence Hydra. As we just demonstrated, this card can just get nutso in this deck. Primordial Worm is obviously big and beefy to start with, but it can be chump blocked for days, and a lot of times the Hydra can be much larger and for a lower mana cost. So yeah, the Hydra is just really nice in this deck. Next, we're going to take out 2 Band Togethers for 2 Kiora Behemoth Breakers. Kiora is just too good with the Hydra, and she'll draw you cards from plenty of other creatures in the deck as well, such as Bloomhulk, for example. So Kiora is just super nice in this deck. Band Together, on the other hand, it's okay, I guess. I mean, it has the potential to be an utter blowout card because your opponent could attack you and then you could cast it, kill one of their attackers, and then untap 2 creatures and surprise block with them. So yeah, I mean, this card could be an absolute blowout, and that's awesome, but also, like, half the time it might not be useful at all. You might not have creatures, your opponent might not have creatures. Like, it's really clunky and situational. Like, there are situations where it'll be just absolutely insane, but then there's other times where you're just gonna be like, I can't even cast this card, I can't do anything with this. Kiora is pretty much always gonna be good. She's gonna give you those really crazy Hydra draws where you have like a turn 4 10-10, plus she's gonna draw you cards, and being able to untap your creatures at end of turn so they can block still, which is kind of what the Band Together does anyway. Yeah, it's just better. It's pretty nice. Definitely happy to have Kiora over the Band Togethers. Next, we're gonna take out 2 Kiora's Dam Breakers and replace them with Rolesk Apex Predator. This card is a little bit pricey as I'm recording this, but it should be slowly dropping as more and more people open and sell it. You know, it's kind of the difficulty for me doing these videos is that I always have to wait for the prices to stabilize, and currently this one's slowly dropping. It's just not dropping fast enough when I need to get this video out, but it should be going down. So yeah, I apologize, but it should be going down. Probably cheaper when you see this video than when I record it, and so on and so forth. But anyway, enough of me whining about prices. The Apex Predator is a little bit smaller, but it also is a little bit cheaper, so it kind of scales down. But the important thing is that it has flying and trample, so it's a legitimate threat. Like, it can't just be chump blocked by tokens or whatever, and it puts counters on a creature when it enters the battlefield, so it makes another one of your creatures also a better threat. And then when it dies, we get to proliferate twice. I mean, imagine this dying with Kiora and the Hydra in play. You proliferate and both cards get a counter, and then the Hydra gets an extra one because Kiora got a counter. Then you proliferate again and Kiora gets another counter and the Hydra gets another 2. Plus, remember, you have plenty of other cards in this deck that add +1/+1 counters, so proliferating twice is pretty great. It's a lose-lose situation for the opponent because they're going to be either taking a beating from this massive flying threat with trample, or if they kill it, they're going to make our entire board so much bigger, so many counters going on so many creatures. So it's just like, it's kind of just a win-win for us. It's not bad. Not bad at all. Next, we're going to take out 4 Guild Pack Informants for 4 Evolution Sages. So the idea here is to have a repeatable way to trigger proliferate. The Informant does it whenever it can deal damage to a player, and the Sage does it whenever we play a land. Now, I will say that against certain decks, the Informant could be better than the Sage. The problem is, if the opponent is playing any flying creatures at all, then we basically have no way to proliferate. Whereas with the Sage, it might not proliferate quite as much because it's reliant on us having lands, so we might not be able to proliferate every single turn, but it's also going to work every single game. So Informant is going to be really good in one game and then useless in another, whereas Evolution Sage is just going to be more consistent, maybe not as explosive in some games, but it's never going to be absolutely useless like Informant. So it's just about consistency here. I will say that if you really wanted to cover all your bases, you could play 2 of each, but that's still a little bit sketchy with the Informant if you draw it against decks that it's useless against. If you're playing with a sideboard, you could play the Informant in the sideboard and then bring it in and take out the Sage whenever you're playing against a deck that has 0 flyers. That's possible. But I think overall, the Sage is more consistent and it's going to be more universally useful. So I definitely think it's an upgrade, but I don't necessarily think that the Informant is terrible. It's just inconsistent and potentially useless in some games. Anyway, next we're going to take out 2 Jace's Projection and replace them with 2 Zagana Utopia Speakers. The Projection is interesting because it can build up so many counters if it stays in the battlefield, but Zagana is twice as large out of the gate for the same price, and it can become an 8/8 with a little bit of extra mana if you adapt it. Plus, it lets you draw a card when it enters the battlefield most of the time, and it gives all of our other creatures with counters on them trample. I mean, it would take the Projection 6 turns to get to an 8/8, which means that if we play it on turn 4, which is the early, I guess technically we could play it on turn 3. Turn 3 is the earliest we could play it, so turn 9 would be the earliest that it could become an 8/8, and it would have to stay in play all that time and never get killed by a removal spell. So I think it would be easy to get wooed by like the potential of Jace becoming massive massive, but you have to take into consideration just how many turns that will actually take versus Zagana already being 2 times larger. So like by the time Jace's projection gets to Zagana's size, it's going to be 2 or 3 turns, right? It's going to be 2 turns after you play it, whereas Zagana is just straight up a 4/4 already. And if we top deck it in the late game, we can play Zagana, next turn we can make it an 8/8, whereas Jace's projection, you know, maybe it'll be an 8/8 several turns later, literally 6 turns later. So yeah, overall I think Zagana is way more consistent, way more powerful most of the time. It has all kinds of extra utility, super nice. Jace's projection is, you know, it's okay, but I think Zagana is gonna win more games more often for sure. Next we're gonna take out another one of the projections for Zhenyangu Wildcrafter, whose name I might be mispronouncing, I'm so sorry. Right, so he can put +1/+1 counters on other creatures, plus he's going to work well with Bioessence Hydra because it's another planeswalker with loyalty counters, so the Hydra can come in even larger. And another thing that's nice is that the Wildcrafter is going to gain counters from Proliferate in order to dish out more counters with his minus ability. He also gives us another way to ramp into a turn 4 Hydra as well, so that's pretty nice. Next we're going to take out Jace's Triumph for a Benthid Biomancer. Drawing cards is great and all, but the Triumph doesn't quite work with our game plan. The Biomancer on the other hand is a 1-drop that can adapt to get a +1/+1 counter, and when you do that you get to draw a card and discard a card. The great thing is that ability doesn't trigger on adapting, it triggers every time the Biomancer gets a counter, meaning that every single time you proliferate with a Biomancer in play, you get to draw a card and discard a card and, you know, filter through your deck to find game winning cards. So overall I think the Biomancer is going to be way more useful than just a one-time draw effect. I mean, obviously drawing is nice, but just having a repeatable way to constantly filter through your deck and also build a big creature while you're at it is super nice compared to just, you know, draw a few cards but then that's it. So we will go with the Biomancer. Next we're going to take out 2 lands because this thing is rocking a full 25 of them, which is way too many, and we'll replace them with 2 more of the Biomancers. These decks always have too many lands. I think 23 is probably fine for this deck. We do have some ramp with the Planeswalkers we've added. It also comes with the mana ramp spell in it already, so I think going down to 23 is just fine, and replacing them with a 1-drop seems just, you know, no big deal. And Biomancers is going to be really good, so yeah, it's fine. Perfectly happy to lose a couple lands for a couple more Biomancers. And then finally, we're going to take out 2 stealth missions for 2 Hadana's Climb. So the stealth mission basically wants to put some counters on creatures while making them difficult to block, or literally impossible to block. Hadana's Climb does the same thing, but it does it much better. Well, sort of. Technically they only get flying. We'll get to that in a second. But the point is, the Climb adds a counter every single turn. Every single turn you get a +1/+1 counter. And that's for the rest of the game, so long as that thing's in play. So that's pretty nice. Then if you target a creature with 3 +1/+1 counters on it, it flips into Winged Temple of Arazka, which is a land that you can pay 3 and tap to give a creature +X/+X, where X is that creature's power, and it gets flying. We have lots of creatures with trample, so giving a creature +X/+X and evasion is pretty sweet, and this can pretty much just end a game. I mean, imagine if we have that 11/11 Bioessence Hydra, for example. With that, you're swinging with a 22 flying trampler. That's, So yeah, Hadana's Climb just gets kind of crazy, and it's a pretty good fit in this deck. And remember, by the way, that even though it's a legendary, you can have a flipped and unflipped version of the card on the battlefield at the same time, because technically they don't have the same name while they're in those states. So you can have the land version out and the enchantment version out at the same time. Totally fine. And yeah, that's it. That is all of our upgrades. Going forward with the deck, you can upgrade the mana base with dual lands such as Hinterland Harbor and Breeding Pool, which are kind of expensive but will prevent you from losing games to Color Screw. So that's nice, but again, totally optional. It'll just make your mana base way more consistent. Also note that Hydroid Crassus is pretty great in this deck as well, but these are very much out of our budget. Definitely can't afford these, but if you happen to have one, maybe you open one in a booster or whatever, definitely recommend that these would work very well in this deck. There are also tons of cards that might be worth experimenting with. You know, things like Pelt Collector, Incubation Druid, Growth Chamber Guardian. All of these would be pretty fantastic in this deck actually. I also contemplated Jade Light Ranger, as that would be pretty sweet in the 3-drop slot, and even Sharkdo Crab might not be terrible, though I feel like that card should belong in a more tempo-based build with lots of tapping and bouncing of blockers. But yeah, Sharkdo Crab could actually be pretty decent if you built the deck more around, that kind of an effect. Would be kind of cool actually. But for now, this list that we have is no doubt much more powerful than what came out of the box. For just $15, we have something that should be way more consistent and should definitely have a much better chance of winning compared to the list that had frickin' Ward Scale Crocodile in it. Ugh. So yeah, we have a much better deck now, no doubt. This deck is far more consistent, far more powerful, and for 15 bucks it seems pretty decent. So yeah, there you go guys. If you want to see more Planeswalker deck upgrade videos like this, just check the description. There should be a playlist there with all of these guides. I've been doing them for a while now, so there should be a backlog of all the previous decks as far back as I think Amonkhet, something like that. But in the meantime, thanks for watching everyone. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.